The ego is the worst confidence trickster we could ever figure, we could ever imagine, because you don't see it.
And the single biggest con is, I am you.
The problem is that the ego hides in the last place that you'd ever look, within itself.
It disguises its thoughts as your thoughts, its feelings as your feelings. You think it's you.
People's need to protect their own egos knows no bounds. They will lie, cheat, steal, kill, do whatever it takes to maintain what we call ego boundaries.
People have no clue that they're in prison. They don't know that there is an ego. They don't know the distinction.
At first it's difficult for the mind to accept that there's something beyond itself, that there's something of greater value and greater capacity for discerning truth than itself.
In creating this imaginary external enemy, we usually made a real enemy for ourselves, and that becomes a real danger to the ego, but that's also the ego's creation.
There is no such thing as an external enemy, no matter what that voice in your head is telling you. All perception of an enemy is a projection of the ego as the enemy.
In that sense, you could say that 100% of our external enemies are of our own creation.
Your greatest enemy is your own inner perception, is your own ignorance, is your own ego.
What happened, a thought came into my head which said, I can't live with myself any longer. And at that moment, a separation happened between myself and that thought, and I looked at the thought and said, I can't live with myself, what does that mean? There must be two of me, there's an I, and there must be some unhappy self that I cannot live with. And through that, although I only understood the full implications years later, a separation happened between the unhappy self, which I later realized is a mental construct consisting of repetitive unhappy thoughts about me and my life, an unhappy story. I was continuously retelling myself the unhappy story of me. And I was so identified with the unhappy story of me that there was no gap between that and me. And that was the self that I couldn't live with. And when I realized that there is a self I can't live with, something separated and I became the consciousness behind the unhappy self. And I could see that the whole structure of the unhappy self was a kind of fiction, a narrative that I was kept repeating in my mind. So the separation happened, and I realized that in essence I am not my story, whether happy or unhappy. I'm the consciousness behind the story. The consciousness or the space, whatever you want to call it, there's not really a name for it. And I suddenly realized myself as that, and with that I was in a state of peace. From then onwards, I never again identified with this unhappy mental construct, the me with its story. And it's all based on that disidentification from this continuous stream of thinking that you take to be yourself, but it's no more than a stream of thinking. It's not who you are in essence.
Here are some of the categories. Assuming or mind reading. Like when you are sure someone is mad at you even though you haven't spoken to them just because they walked in and didn't say hi. Shoulds, must, and oughts.
Those are the insane demands that we make upon ourselves in our quest to be impossibly perfect.
The fairy tale fantasy. Where we demand an ideal for our life and decide that anything less than that ideal just isn't fair. Overgeneralizing. Nobody likes me. I always ruin everything. And finally, catastrophizing. When you take a little problem and turn it into a big, terrible, life-changing event.
The thought, when it comes out, it just has so much validity, you know, that everything else around it is wrong and only what you feel is right, you know, and it's kind of, it takes you out of context, you know, and things seem bigger and just nothing else, you know, this is like the biggest problem that exists at the moment. So it tricks you by yeah, like, you know, like making things seem really real and important. The ego is actually very helpless. It's very helpless without you feeding it darkness, you know? So actually its existence kind of relies on you. It has no strength, you know? And so if you are aware of its of what it actually is, you actually can kill it. You can kill it.
So the ego basically would be easily influenced by satanic voices or by whisperings or by anything which would deviate the person from the straight path. Once the person accepts those whisperings as their own thoughts, for example, if a person fails in life at something, maybe in an exam, or if something bad happens to them in a bad experience or something, or so on, then the whisperings can get strong and they can go like, you're not going to succeed at the next one because you failed last time, so you're probably messed up forever. You're not going to be able to succeed next time either. And if the person accepts this as their own thoughts or their own assumptions, and they go, yeah, I'm probably going to fail again, I believe that, that's the ego saying that to them, because the shaitan takes that insecurity, attacks it, and the ego forms it as a part of the self.
Exhibit comes to us from Japan and Mr. Masuro Emoto. Mr. Emoto became terribly interested in the molecular structure of water and what affects it. Now, water is the most receptive of the 4 elements. Mr. Emoto thought perhaps it would respond to non-physical events. So he set up a series of studies, applied mental stimuli, and photographed it with a dark field microscope. This first picture is a picture of water from the Fujiwara Dam. And this picture is the same water after receiving a blessing from a Zen Buddhist monk. Now, in this next series of pictures, Mr. Emoto printed out words, taped them to bottles of distilled water, and left them out overnight. This first photograph is a picture of the pure distilled water, just the essence of itself. These subsequent photographs, as you can see, are each different. This is the chi of love. And we move along here to thank you. And you can see where he taped that to this bottle here. But if you read Japanese, you already knew that. Now, Mr. Emoto speaks of the thought or intent being the driving force in all of this. The science of how that actually affects the molecules is unknown, except to the water molecules, of course. And it's really fascinating when you keep in mind that 90% of our bodies are water.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? If thoughts can do that to water, imagine what our thoughts can do to us.